Good morning and good afternoon, and welcome to the Elite Marketer webinar series sponsored by Kaon Interactive. I hope everybody's having a good day. I know I am. Before we get started, I just wanted to quickly direct everybody's attention to the QA section of Zoom, which is a great way for you to ask questions to the presenters throughout the course of this webinar. Now, with that out of the way, I would like to introduce you to today's presenters, Joe Cumello, SVP and CMO at Ciena Corporation, and Gavin Finn, President and CEO at Kaon Interactive. Hi to both of you.
Hey.
Hello, Joe.
Joe has been at Ciena for more than 11 years and is currently leading a dynamic group of global marketing and communications experts. In a recent Forbes article titled Alignment Between Sales and Marketing Drives Growth at Ciena, Joe was asked, over the last 5 years your team has been together, Ciena has grown from $2.4 billion to $3.6 billion. Can you share what it took to crack the code on the marriage between sales and marketing? To which Joe answered, it all starts with an invitation by sales leadership to the table and recognition of the value of marketing. Looking forward to hearing more about that today, Joe.
And I'm looking forward to sharing it.
Yeah. And with more than 25 years of success in building growth-oriented marketing technology companies, Gavin Finn is currently the president and CEO of Kaon Interactive, the leader in digital sales and marketing applications for the enterprise. Under his leadership, the company has helped B2B organizations like Cisco, IBM, Ortho Clinical Diagnostics, Baker Hughes, Thermo Fisher Scientific, Siemens, HPE, and many more increase sales productivity, reduce marketing costs, and transform their digital customer engagement models. Gavin holds both a PhD and an MS from MIT and teaches entrepreneurial marketing at Tufts University. Gavin was also recently awarded the Transformative CEO Award for Digital Transformation by Forbes. Congratulations, Gavin.
Thank you, Donna. Great to be here.
We're so excited to learn from you today on where it is that executives are seeing marketing opportunities in economic uncertainty. For start off, I would like to actually ask our audience a quick poll about how they are seeing, and if they are seeing budget or resources shifting due to economic uncertainty. So I'm just going to give that a second to see what we're seeing here.
Says I can't vote because I'm a panelist. It's too bad.
No worries. I'm sure we'll get to hear about
you'll get my opinion
today. Yes.
That's a better reason to not let you vote than having the wrong address on your poll or something.
That's right. That's right.
Let's see. So the answers are saying overwhelmingly yes, and we have one answer that says not yet, but expecting. So this is something that is definitely on top of mind. And I would like to kind of turn to you, Gavin, and have us walk us through the background of what it is that's going on with the recession and what it is that's leading sellers to adapt to a more self-serve and self-discover customer model and demands.
The key issues here is, first of all, we're not in a recession, but there is the threat or expectation of a potential recession. So from a factual point of view, the economic conditions that define a recession have not yet been met. And it's also a global economy. So you might see different definitions and different conditions in different regions. But what's really happening here is that we're seeing the confluence of a variety of very significant macroeconomic factors. One of them is coming out of the pandemic, there's a significant supply chain challenge. And that supply chain challenge has affected companies globally in a variety of different industries, not just B2B companies, but of course the B2C companies as well. As everybody was in lockdown and ordering products from home, there was a tremendous crunch. There was a lot of changes in the way that product shipping costs were calculated. There are a lot of supply chain capacity problems. So we're coming out of that, and that has caused one of the key effects there has been inflationary pressure. So we see global inflation as being one of the challenges. Typically in the times of an inflation situation, central bankers will raise interest rates to tamp down inflation. One of the problems that we're seeing now with the confluence of some of these issues is increased interest rates, inflation going up, but also very dynamic labor conditions. And so in order for the typical central banker reactions to work, the model has to sort of conform to previous economic conditions, and it's not conforming to previous economic conditions. So what this is causing is this uncertainty that you've talked about. People are worried about high interest rates leading to recessions, and recessions usually involve labor, significant pressures on labor. And what's happening today is almost the opposite with respect to labor. So the reality is that we aren't in a recession, but there is the potential for a recession based on what's happening with central bank interest rates, money supply. And this uncertainty is causing, in our experience, a lot of executives to change the way they're thinking about planning for the next year or two. And I think what we need to think about as marketers is, first of all, what are the impacts for our customers and the markets that we serve? And also, how do we deal internally with respect to what is available to us? What tools do we still have given this uncertainty? Most of the time, when there's growth, or even if there's no growth, but it's predictable, people have a much better sense and a much higher degree of sort of economic confidence in what's going to be happening. And when there's this uncertainty and the volatility, I think that's when people get really unchained from their previous models in terms of what they do with marketing or sales expansion. So I think this is the sort of the summary, is that the uncertainty is caused by the fact that we really are not in one of those typical economic cycles, and it's unclear as to what's going to happen based on what the central bankers are doing. Joe, I don't know if you would agree, or if you have any other sort of thoughts.
I think from my experience, or from the place that I sit, Gavin, because it's not a standard situation from an economic standpoint, we're not actually seeing customers from an ordering standpoint or from a behavior standpoint really change based on some of the pressures you're talking about. So from a planning standpoint for the future, we're still planning the business the way we would normally plan the business, although we have our eye on the recessionary issues that you're talking about. The more concerning or important fact for us in planning for the future is really around customer behavior on the back of the 3-year, sort of pandemic, and then the shift to a more hybrid environment for how they work and how they want to interact with us, right? So we'll get into that in more detail, I'm assuming, but on the basis of those changes in behaviors, you have to make very different investments and very different marketing plans, and it's shifting how we're spending money. So right now, definitely have our eye on what you're describing, 100%, but still sort of the majority of our planning and our focus on how we spend money is still focused on customer behaviors, based on how the world's changed and how they want to meet with us and talk to us.
Joe, are you seeing any other of the kind of the 5 C's that we showcase also interrupting the way you're planning your go-to-market strategy besides new customer needs, competition, complexity?
Yeah, I mean, all the above, right? I mean, I think, but those dynamics play a role. So I'm in the technology space, and I'm assuming many, maybe many folks who are here today might also be in that space, although I haven't seen the list. But the fact of the matter is that in the technology space, those 5 C's, as you described them, are a factor all the time: competition and change and et cetera. So we're constantly in a rapidly evolving and changing environment that we're reacting to and planning to. So our behavior is always to look at those things as part of the planning process. So I think that's fairly consistent year over year. The real change is that the aspect of selling and marketing to the customer base, where it was almost exclusively, we sell a very high-end product that has a very high-end ASP. And so the engagement model had in the past had almost always been very intimate, very long-term, and very face-to-face. And the shifting behavior by customers toward driving the digital engagement way deeper into the selling process. So instead of the first 10% or 15% being digital, and then the latter half of the engagement, 85% being face-to-face and negotiated in a hand-to-hand combat kind of way, we're now seeing that digital journey go way longer and deeper than it did before. And the face-to-face is reserved for key moments, for critical and important key moments in the selling process. And so planning for that, yeah, do you have to take the 5 C's into account as you described them? Do you have to take the recession into account? Yeah, 100% as part of your planning process. But when it comes to the investments we're making and the shifts we're making and the resourcing decisions we're making, they really have more to do with that shift in behavior. Now, listen, if a recession wave comes over the bow and customers start changing the way they purchase, and things start slowing down, we'll all behave appropriately in that situation, of course, right? But as Gavin mentioned, and I think it's an important point, we're not actually seeing a lot of that yet. So one step at a time, right?
One step at a time. That's right,
Yeah.
Joe. The theme that you talked about the customer and putting that at the center.
Mhm.
Gavin, you had recently had an interview with Neil Patel talking exactly about this topic. And I'd like to share a bit of that video for context, because it was really interesting interview.
One of the things that you've always advocated for when you talk about digital marketing as a generalized term is find channels where you can create engagement, right? This is something that's been much more recently emphasized by a lot of the B2B companies, as opposed to just an awareness channel or an opportunity to deliver messages outbound. How do you create engagement? And this is something that we have observed in the selling and in the marketing space as being an imperative in the digital environment. How have you seen that shift to purely sort of awareness sort of campaigns versus moving down further in the funnel to get engagement and then moving them into the sales process itself?
Sure, yeah. The problem with the B2B sector is typically the sales cycle is quite long. And what we see is people don't make decisions right away. Purchase price is expensive, not just for the dollar amount, but the cost internally to implement the solution or the product or whatever it is that you're buying. And what we've seen is, yes, more marketing dollars are also being spent on engagement. The reason being in marketing, they call it the rule of 7. When someone sees or interacts with your brand 7 times, they're much more likely to evangelize it, become a customer, talk positively about it. And the only way to really do that is to engage with the customer, whether it's on social media or paid ads or SEO or content or responding to them in comments. You know, it's a necessary evil because there's so much competition these days. With cloud computing, it's just increased how much competitors are there, how much more affordably people compete, especially in the B2B arena. And for that, you need to really engage and build that community.
Ooh, so Joe, right, exactly what you said about the sales process changing and where people are and how much they're engaging without you there.
Yeah.
Gavin, Neil had said that more marketing dollars are being spent on engagement, especially in today's competitive market. Why are executives now prioritizing becoming digital leaders? And what does being a digital leader even mean?
Well, I want to get back to something Joe said. I always listen very carefully to what Joe says, and then I go off and say those things and pretend that they're mine. But usually what happens is you have these phases where people get bucketed. And a long time ago, we would bucket people as in the consumer space as online customers and offline customers, you know, that buy in a store, but in reality, everyone's just a customer. And I think today there is it's axiomatic. It's almost redundant to say digital leader.
Mm-hmm.
You're either a leader or you're not a leader. It's impossible to not be a digital leader if you're going to be in a leadership role. Right? And I think what we have to recognize is that, in Joe's words, putting that buyer behavior at the center of all of our marketing decision-making and our sales decision-making, that is a paradigm shift. It's a power shift that used to be, because we had this control, we controlled the information, we knew we were the industry experts, we were the technology experts, we were driving the change. The customers would come to us when they needed to know something. That power dynamic has shifted. And so what we've seen the convergence in digital, but really it's a bigger trend. What we really have to think about is doing exactly what Joe said, is take the buying behavior as sort of the starting point for everything we do. And if we look at the real world today, the pandemic certainly accelerated things, but there was a trend in this direction well before that. Customers are doing more and more on their own, and they're doing it digitally. And the more, when we say more, it's not just they're spending more time, they're actually accomplishing more online. It's not just looking at your product specs and going through the comparative product definitions. What they're really doing is they're problem solving, and they're collaborating, and they're discussing and engaging online. So I think it's an imperative. It's no longer an option for us to be doing this. So why are marketers spending more money that way? Because there's almost no option if you want to stay in to be relevant with the customer. That's where the customers are. That's where we need to be. Now, that doesn't mean it's exclusively online. As Joe said, there's still 10, 15% of the process is offline, and there's events are coming back, and there's lots of ways of thinking about a multi-channel or an omni-channel environment. But really what we have to think about is if we understand that buying behavior really well, and we engage with the customers where they are, that means we've got to be completely digitally agile at every phase. And as Joe has said in the past, this is a non-linear process. It's not like they go from step 1 to step 2 to step 3 to step 4. And that's what we used to call the buyer's journey.
Yeah.
The buyer's journey is almost an anachronism. It's really a problem-solving journey, and they'll buy stuff if they have to. But really what they're doing is solving a problem. And that's really where our understanding of that behavior is so critical.
Yeah. I mean, you couldn't have said it better. It's what is the business? It's a bit of a cliche, but what is the business problem the customer's trying to solve, and then tap your ability as a marketer to tap into the answer that you're the answer to that you can reflect it, and that you can be the answer to that, is obviously the home run in the B2B space. We found that time and time again. A couple things just to touch on as part of the video and as part of some of the things that you said, Gavin. Engagement is a key word. It's an important word. Measuring and monitoring and making sure that those engagements keep happening in the digital sphere. And one of the things we've discovered is the days of analytics and metrics that just sort of say or show that you've gotten a lot of people to come to your site or to engage with you in a certain way actually isn't helpful anymore in building this digital journey. What you actually have to do, and this might have been part of the Forbes article, Donna, that you were referring to, we're actually redefining how to measure the digital engagement. We call it at Sienna our EKG after monitoring a heartbeat EKG, but it's actually our global customer engagement modeling. And it's a set of analytics tools that monitors every single touch point across sales and marketing that a customer does with us. So for instance, they visit the website, it's sort of captured. They attend a webinar, it's captured. They go to a customer meeting and they engage with the salesperson, it's sort of captured. And all of this is plotted over time as a customer engagement model. And as we're leading up to an RFP, or as we're leading up to a decision by the customer, we're starting to get data over time on what a win looks like. So it should look like the engagement from that customer. Let's say it's a major service provider where we sell to big telecom operators and cloud players. Let's just say over time, the engagement with said major service provider is going up and up and up and to the right. And it's starting to peak as you get closer and closer to the decision. That's a beautiful chart. And that's what normally looks like a normal customer engagement for a win. Now let's look at that chart for a loss. What happens is you see the engagement going up and up and up. And then in a couple of key metrics like visits and engagement with content, video views, social engagement, and sales engagement, you see a drop. That indicates that they've moved on to someone else, or they're in negotiations with someone else. And so the power of that is actually going back to the sales organization and saying, yeah, this does not look like the normal customer. This does not look like a normal EKG for a win. You need to turn around, go back into the account, and re-engage. Now a great sales and marketing team should have a feeling for that. They should know, based on other indicators. But if you're early enough, you can actually sort of change outcomes based on the customer engagement model. So the reason why I'm double clicking on this a bit is because it's not just about building the right engagement model, making sure you meet the customer where they need to go. It's not also only about making sure you reflect the right business problem as part of pulling someone in and building content. It's actually using the data you're collecting for insights that allow you to change whether or not you win or lose, or trying to get to the point at which you have enough data to try and shape an outcome. And to me, all of that put together is where the next generation of marketing goes. And actually using the data to change outcomes. So that's what we're really excited about on our side and how we're investing.
Can I pick up on two things that Joe just said there, because I think they're very interesting. First of all, the very last point you made, I think, is also a sea change. It's a paradigm shift with respect to data. One of the things that happened when there was a lot of digital data is everybody started collecting a lot of the data, an enormous amount of charts about time on page and all that kind of stuff. I don't know what your experience is, Joe, but we deal with hundreds of marketing executives, and almost nobody knew what to do with those kinds of data and actually used it, right?
Right.
Too much data is kind of not usable. So one point there that I think is really critical is information that can be helpful to achieve an outcome, as opposed to collecting data that makes you look good or feel good, right?
Yeah. Oh, well, Gavin, if you don't mind me jumping in here, look, I think there's a historical motion that we were seeing in the organization. And of course, great people and we love our team, but they would sometimes, getting in front of me from a data and analytics standpoint, they would share the data that looked the best for a specific project. And then the next time I was presented to, let's call it a different project, it was a different set of data points. These data points look really good. And over time, we kind of came to realize that people were picking and choosing the data points, that they wanted to share. It's okay. Some of it was really good data, and obviously, but what we weren't getting to was an insight that would allow us to change an outcome. Maybe that outcome, maybe that change we want to see is how we spend money needed to be different. Like we're buying the wrong media properties or whatever. People have been doing that kind of work for years. Is this an efficient spend? Is it not an efficient spend? On the marketing side, the real sales and marketing alignment using digital technology and understanding the customer, where that really has gone through breakthroughs is where marketing's data can be used not to just change marketing's behavior, but where it's used to help the sales team win, and where it can change sales behavior. And that's where sales and marketing alignment takes off, in my opinion. And I think those are the breakthroughs we need to do as an industry.
Well, that's the second point that I was going to hone in on what you just said.
Sorry if I jumped.
It reinforced. It means I'm not quite as slow as I thought I was. But essentially, what you're talking about is a much more personalized collaboration between sales and marketing around outcomes that are, in the past, marketing was very much sort of a one-to-many kind of measurement kind of environment. Now that doesn't go away, but the ability to really affect specific outcomes, not just with specific companies, but actual individuals within those companies and roles and personas and buying ecosystems. I think that's a big shift. And it's not just about the data, but it's also about that key alignment and collaboration between the two teams. Because if what's happened is customer behavior is much more digital self-service for the vast majority of the time, then it's in sales' interest to invite you to that table and say, we need the best targeted messages and value stories at these different key touch points for sales, not just for marketing, but for sales. Because if we follow that EKG, then all of your touch points are sales-oriented touch points. Then where are they getting the information that's driving those engagements? It's marketing, right?
Yeah.
So the sales team is now no longer disjointed from the marketing engine or from the marketing organization.
Yeah.
It's really the same process.
Yeah.
And I think that's the second part of that key insight that you had, which is this confluence is that it's the ability to have sales and marketing collaborate around those outcomes so that it's no longer just the marketing is air cover. You used to hear that marketing provides the air cover, sales goes in and does the one stuff. And I think that's a paradigm shift as well, because then that drives marketing spend and behavior and focus, but it also shifts the attitudes of the people involved.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know what your experience is, but I would suspect that that's a significant behavior change, right?
Well, look, I think there are a number of things coming together in what you're saying. The first is that because customers want to take the digital engagement farther, the natural organization, the organization that's naturally inclined to support that motion is marketing. So part of the issue is that sales understands the talent and how to utilize the talent of the marketing organization to help them manage that digital journey farther, right? So that's issue one on the table. Issue two on the table is that marketing as an organization is spending more money around, across the B2B space on these front end go-to-market sales, ABM programs, account-based marketing and account individual or, one-to-one or one-to-few projects that where the sales and marketing teams in the field are collaborating and saying, let's hit these 5 or 10 people very tightly, very specific message, very specific business problem we're going to solve. And because we have to do it over the digital medium, we have to collaborate. And then when it comes to you needing to meet with them live, here's, let's collaborate also on what we say and what we present, et cetera. So if you take the fact that the customer behavior is changing, marketing knows what it's doing in the digital side of the equation, that sales loves ABM concepts, and the one-to-few and one-to-one marketing engagement strategy, what you end up with is a beautiful, sorry for the hyperbole there in the word, but a distinctive change in the narrative in the company. So instead of it being sales or marketing, it's sales and marketing. And at some point in time, which is starting to happen even in our company, is you just start saying things like the go-to-market functions or the go-to-market function. And so now it's not even sales or marketing or sales and marketing, it's the go-to-market engine. And now it's one, sort of one view of that process, and it's just a go-to-market. So to me, that's the best outcome of all these shifts, is that is the unity that's driven in a part of B2B business that has traditionally been contentious. We have broken the contention because of these factors. And that is the thing we should be most proud of if we lean into it.
Right.
I just wanted to ask one quick question. Sorry, Donna, just to interrupt for 1 second. That's rare. It's a rare accomplishment that you have. And I know that you have, Ciena's got a unique leadership role when it comes to this collaboration. What do you think the critical factors are at Ciena that enables you to be so successful in changing that dynamic, which frankly, all of the big B2B industries struggle with?
There's a few really important things. Number one, it's the person, our chief revenue officer, the person who runs our global customer engagement, our sales organization, is a sort of a friend and a peer of mine. We've worked together for years and we trust each other. We've gone out of our way to bring each other in to conversations, to make each other part of each other's leadership conversations. We attend a lot of each other's functions, and so that the lines over time have blurred because of our relationship. But I don't think it's necessarily a relationship only issue. It's a performance issue, right? The more that those things came together, the better we saw things actually performing. So it just drove things even closer over time, right? So I think that's an important step one. Step two is that because those things started to come together more closely at the leadership level, it started to bleed into the people that report to those folks. And so now you have all of the sales leadership staff doing the same level of leaning in with their marketing counterparts, whether they're regional, global, or vertical, or whatever the case is. So now you have sales and marketing people meeting all the time and engaging with each other and going deeper and deeper and deeper on how they're going to build the business together. And you can't pry them apart, you know, in a lot of ways. So that's the second piece. The third and the last one is an executive leadership team that truly believes in the value funding these organizations appropriately, and that the value of that relationship is really important to the growth of the company going forward. And so you don't get this what I would call biased airtime related to how these organizations are run. So okay, marketing's a service organization, stay in your spot. Sales is really and of course, sales does the heavy lifting. They win the deals. There's no contention about that. They're out there, they're winning the business. We understand the role they play. Our job is to make it easier and faster for them, and to partner with them so that we can get to close, right? But the leadership team understands all that and actually leans into it. So obviously also very helpful. And an illustration of that is our sales kickoff every year is not called SKO, it's called SMKO. Sales and marketing kickoff. And both of us, both Jason and myself, we spend a lot of time working on the content, marrying the content together. And I know I'm droning on a little bit long here to answer your question, but the point is those three things, SMKO illustrates the unity there. But it starts with people and a belief system that says the company is better and stronger because these organizations are in alignment. And I will tell you, I plan to be at Ciena for a very long time, but if I was not, the first question I'd ask in the interview of the leadership team as they try to bring me over is, how do you feel about the sales and marketing relationship? I would never replicate. I would only want to be part of a solution in replicating what we've built here.
Makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
Thank you, Joe. I want to hone in on something that you both said about customer experience, especially in digitally, right? Because Gavin, you said that it's no longer an option, whether you're a digital leader, you're just a leader. I wanted to ask our audience as well, what they are seeing in investments and what do they think is happening with his investments, specifically in regards to digital experiences. I'm just kind of launch a poll, and always curious to see whether it's under or over what the actual percentage that's expected by Forrester is. So I'm going to give it a minute or two just so we can get some responses in.
While we're waiting for the response, I also think that something that is part of that experience is that I see there's a continuum of experience. And one thing that's, again, I think Ciena does this extremely well. There is a consistency of the brand experience and also the individual experience that happens online and offline, right? And I think that was not always the case, right? I'm not talking about Ciena necessarily, I'm just talking about in general. There were different ways, different messages, different experiences that customers or prospects would have based on the channel. And I also think that convergence reflects that buyer behavior centricity that you were talking about also. It's not just about, are we creating these experiences, but the nature of the experience is consistent, right?
Yeah. It absolutely should be over time. I agree. But before we dig into that, maybe Donna will let you. Maybe you can tell us where we stand there on our poll.
So, as expected, it's actually most people had said 55%, but it's actually 66% of budget increases expected for digital experiences specifically. So, Joe, obviously investing in customer experience while reducing or managing expenses can seem contradictory because you're investing in something more, but you're expecting to manage expenses.
Yeah.
How have you managed to make those investments in digital customer engagement specifically while managing your expenses?
Well, you have a broad budget envelope given to you by the corporation, and you have to make prioritization decisions on what you think is going to help the company at the end of the day. And luckily, in the situation we've just described in the first 30 some minutes here of this conversation, we've described something that allows you, it's sort of easy to make decisions in that kind of environment. So you say to yourself, okay, the data coming out of Gartner and others is very specific. We're seeing the new generation of buyers, B2B or B2C, take the customer engagement digitally way farther than any previous generation ever had. If that's the case, then we better invest in something that's going to help us with it. It's as simple as that, right? So you got to make trade-offs, and you say to yourself, okay, so instead of me over-investing in lead gen, technologies and platforms and tracking, et cetera, maybe right now what's actually most important is quality of engagement, QoE, and how we measure that quality of engagement, because that's actually a stronger indicator, at least in my business, of whether or not we're going to be successful or not. So, even the technology we're working on with Kaon right now, where we can curate an experience where a customer comes into a virtual lobby and a virtual engagement area, and can actually, we can have a salesperson, either the customer themselves can walk themselves through it, or we can have a salesperson take them through it as a curated experience. That environment, being able to, what we normally would have had to have done in a lab up in maybe Ottawa or in Maryland or in California or in India, whatever the case is, we're now replicating digitally, which serves as we're talking about the investments Ciena's making. Investing in this allows us to replicate that experience digitally, right? So hopefully what it does is we can take a customer through the buying cycle, at least the pieces they might normally have had to fly to a facility to. Now we're going to put into a digital arena. And hopefully the outcome of that is they've learned a lot more about the business. They still feel like it's a personal and curated experience, and it moves the business forward. So I think that's, it's easy decision for me to make in terms of investment, because I actually know, based on the data, that that's what customers want to do. They want to be moved through the journey digitally, at least to start. So maybe I'll stop waxing poetic there, Donna. But that's why it's easy to make the investment shift.
Joe, you say it's easy. So many people are struggling with where to make their investments now, and I think it really does take.
I'm sounding a little cavalier. Is that what you're telling me?
No,
it's
no.
Okay.
Not at all. I think it's something that a lot of people are struggling with, and it's refreshing to see somebody actually saying that this is an easy decision. We're going with what our customers need and want, and that's where we're kind of leading the conversation.
Yeah,
Gavin, I know this trend that Joe is talking about and really focusing on the customer is not just at Ciena. Could you maybe talk more about where you're seeing this as well?
I just want to start by saying that a budget is a reflection of a value system.
Mm-hmm.
And that's true of a household, it's true of a government, it's true of a company. Right? If you look at government and you say, where are we spending money, that is a reflection of what the society values. Right? So when you look at a marketing budget or a corporate budget, it's a reflection of what they actually value, not what they say they value. Right? So the reason that there's so much success in Joe's organization and he's in alignment is because they actually value the customer and the customer engagement. So it's not really cavalier. I understand it sounds unusual, but when they say it's an easy decision, because their budget actually reflects that value. Now, in those organizations where it's tough to make those decisions, that's because their value system is out of alignment with what they need to be spending money on. So we see this a lot where there's organizations in different industries, they say the customer is important, they say customer engagement is important, but that's not where they're spending their money, right? Mm-hmm. And that's just a diagnosis of saying that's not really what they value, right? What they value is what got them there. And that's one of the worst decision-making criteria for the future is what got us here. Anybody reads books about IBM can tell that story, right? So I think the notion of understanding what customers want and where things are going in the future, letting that drive your value system, That's really the senior executive strategy that I think Joe was talking about.
Yeah.
Once that is aligned, then the budget does become easy, because you can't make a decision to spend money on brochures if your customers are doing everything digitally, right? So I think one thing we can always do is we can look at the strategic, you can raise a level of abstraction and say, what are the strategic initiatives that allow us to accomplish these objectives based on what we believe, right? The belief system that Joe talked about is not something we should take lightly. Companies organize themselves, they structure their entire teams, and they spend money based on belief systems. Right? That belief system is the reflection of whether you're looking to the past or to the future. And if you look at where customers are going, what their behavior reflects, then that drives your behavior. And you get things like this EKG, which is a predictive tool, it's an analytical tool. If you don't, what you end up with is a bunch of web analytics that people are still looking at saying, what the heck happened, right? So I think what we can all do is look at prioritizing, simplifying our prioritization process. And if we have, for example, Ciena is an incredibly technology-driven leadership style company, but they put their customers at the center of all their decisions, and they invest in technology that is sort of the Wayne Gretzky model of going where the puck is going to be, right? And I think that's a value system. And I think it's a fairly straightforward diagnosis. If you were a doctor of financial analysis, you could diagnose the patient by looking at where they're spending money.
Yeah.
And you could very easily say that, what does that reflect with respect to our strategic?
So Gavin, let me double click there for a second. I wrote a piece in Fast Company recently where we diagnosed how sales and marketing alignment happens in organizations. And one of the things that I broke down was, besides all the issues we talked about, it's where the sales and marketing leader came from. And have a lot to do with their level of commitment to sales and marketing alignment. So for instance, if you're a marketing leader that came from the brand side of marketing, let's say, well, then your value system has been shaped by investments and thinking around brand for many years. That's a beautiful thing, by the way. That I don't have a problem with that. I'm saying that's so that's where you came from. So then when you have a conversation, when the brand architect that now is a CMO is having a conversation with the sales leader, the context by which the conversations they have is, well, we need a stronger, let me work for you and try and build a stronger brand in your accounts. And I'll do these big air cover campaigns to build brand. And the sales leader might say to themselves, oh, that's super interesting, thank you. But on a practical hand-to-hand combat basis, it's not exactly what they need from at this moment, maybe as the business shifts. Conversely, if the sales leader has never had to work with a marketing organization and doesn't know how to use that marketing organization as a service organization, as a partner, or whatever, you're not going to see any kind of support or help or leaning in, because that person's never had that experience and actually doesn't see any value in it. So my counsel has always been that when you look for a job, or if you're an executive team looking to hire and resolve these problems, you want to look for the types of marketing people or salespeople who know how to lean into each other if you believe that you need to solve this problem. You have marketing people who are brand architects, marketing people who are lead gen experts. You have marketing people like myself who have focused on sales and sales engagement their whole career, right? So maybe it's a little more obvious why I lean into this, and then you got sales leaders who don't have, who haven't worked with marketing, and those that have. It's an under discussed issue related to solving some of the issues we're talking about today. Where did those executives come from? What were their experiences? I think you were touching on it a little bit there in what you were saying, but I just wanted to kind of like punch the point a little bit, punch it up a little bit.
If I could punch it up even just one rung on the ladder higher, I actually think that there's I don't want to say it's endemic, but certainly a common problem that CEOs and CFOs are not as familiar with what marketing is as they could be. And one of the challenges, I think, the reasons that people get hired into these roles that come from sort of stovepipe is because they are not viewing the marketing role as a strategic alignment role with respect to sales, right? Or with respect to strategic objectives in general. And so I think that there's both a sort of the stovepipe problem with respect to those leadership roles in the organization. But I don't know if you've seen this, but I think it's rare for a senior executive leader, corporate leader, to truly understand the breadth of the value that marketing can bring, particularly when it is in that alignment, orientation.
Look, I think in the B2B space, it's easy to have, especially in tech, to have companies driven very specifically by tech, by a technology agenda, and marketing is sort of a service organization to that. Look, in B2C, you can't make that argument. There are some marketing organizations that run those companies, right, for very good reason. Very marketing driven budgets and marketing driven decision making. So adapting to those different environments is the way to fix it. And look, at the end of the day, if you have a CEO that doesn't believe in marketing, you're not going to resolve this. You got to go find a different job. So it is what it is.
Or become the CEO.
So. Or just take the role, right? Gary, I'm not after your job. Everything's going great. We're good.
Gary's one of the rare executives who does understand,
yes,
and
he does.
Is a very thoughtful strategic marketing
yes
as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
Grateful to work for him.
Hey, I would just encourage the people watching to drop any questions that they have in the QA section. I know we have just about 13 minutes left, and I want to make sure that we get as much knowledge from Joe and Gavin as possible. Gavin, go ahead. Sorry.
No, please.
I was going to ask if there is people that aren't maybe in different verticals, right? What sometimes we hear is that, well, that may be true for this vertical, but it's not true for mine. This is still going to be the same in mine. I hear it in industrial, for example. Could you touch on the industry-wide? Is this an industry-wide trend, and why it is that people still have that opinion that their industry is safe?
Well, if you mean safe from the digital transformation, I think that's probably what you're. My opinion, I'll get Joe's, because I know Joe's not so focused on his own company. He's got a very broad perspective, and he's a B2B marketing leader in general. So I'll defer to him, but I'll start very briefly by saying that there are some very common threads across all industries. Mm-hmm. And there is a big misperception in some industries that their customers are not exhibiting the behavior that Joe talked about. Mm-hmm. And they're just plain wrong. I can't say it any more plainly, they're wrong. And the reason is their customers are human. Every one of their customers, even though they work for big companies, they're human beings. And that's just what human beings are doing. It varies in degree, and it does vary by region, there's no question. Some regions are, but there is an inevitable and undeniable trend towards more self-service problem solving and engaging with partners and vendors and RFPs and other things later in the cycle. It's just inevitable and it's unavoidable. So it's a recognition, I think, that this is happening. It's not about to happen. It's not going to happen next year. It's happening. And I think there's a little bit of denial on the part of some individuals and potentially even within some industries. So for example, in the industrial space, you get a lot of pushback saying, oh, well, our customers wear hard hats and boots and they're out there in the field. Well, guess what? They have a phone and they're using their phone, right? And they go home at night and they're using this thing called Google. And there's an enormous commonality there. I hear in other industries, life sciences, well, it's so heavily regulated, we can't do this stuff online. Well, same thing, they actually are doing it online. The only issue is you're not, right? So I think what we've noticed is that people tend to sort of idealize everybody else's industry, everybody else's company. Well, they're ahead of us. They can do it because, they're big or whatever it is. I see that as excuse making. Yeah. The reality is this is happening across industries. It's happening in almost every vertical. And the transformation, it's not digitization, it's the digital transformation of that buyer behavior is the key determinant as to who's going to win in the B2B space. If you respond, if you anticipate, if you engage and accelerate based on that, you're going to win across industries. That's just my opinion. Joe, you may have,
Yeah, I obviously I agree with you. I do think there's nuance and differences between industries in terms of how quickly they may or may not be adopting some of this. I think what's really important is just to take a barometer of an intergenerational barometer of customer behavior and spend some time looking at it, because the generations that are coming into the workforce now, and millennials are in their 40s, right? So like saying things like millennials are coming up is ridiculous. They're key decision makers in some very important industries and verticals. Look at how the digital native generations have been trained to interact with buying behaviors. They have an Apple-like and Amazon-like day-to-day experience with how they consume and purchase. So they do their own research. They have carts, and they hold stuff in carts for a while, and then they compare products against each other. And then they make the decision themselves, and it can even be a very expensive decision, like a car online, like you can do, Tesla, or whatever the case is. Not that I want to evoke any Elon Musk feelings right now, but take other said large purchase, whatever it is. But my point is that everyone's being mentally trained to purchase a certain way based on what's going on in their personal lives, right? And so now you take that into the workplace, B2B, doesn't matter what vertical you're in, and then you give them a similar experience. You say, hey, come into my lobby, walk through my demo, walk through how this technology looks. Let me spin it around for you. Oh, you want to compare it to something else? Okay, let's compare it to something else, etc. And now you're tapping into pathways in the brain that have already been smoothed over over the last 15 years in their personal lives. You cannot tell me that won't resonate no matter what vertical you're in. Now, you have to acknowledge that there are industries like mine where the purchase decision, the moment at which the customer really wants to engage and get into hand-to-hand combat, that is done live. In my business, it is done live right now. The final moments and the last important meetings are done face-to-face negotiations and really critical conversations. That's okay. but all we're trying to do is smooth over the first part and tap into the programming that we all have for that Amazon, Apple-like experience. That's what we're talking about bridging here.
I think it's critical. And I also think that something that happened during the pandemic, during the lockdown periods in the pandemic, is some of those paradigms about what has to happen actually were disproved. There was some myth busting going on there, about what has to happen face to face and what has to happen. Yeah. And I do agree that these very large purchases, very complex, sometimes long-term, company changing purchases, they have to be done in a mixed mode and a multi-channel environment. Yeah. We saw, for example, in the life sciences industry, during the pandemic, we had one of the sales leaders call us specifically and say that they just had an experience with one of their teams where one of their customers made a $1 million purchase on a product they'd never seen physically with a person they'd never met. Yeah. Online, right? $1 million. Right? And so that changed their expectation of what's possible, right? Yeah. It doesn't say that happens all the time or that's what you've got to move to. It just makes it possible, right? And I think this is also one of the elements of the digital transformation is, I think if we're open to possibilities, we can use our imagination, we'll actually find ways of working that we didn't think were realistic in the past. Yeah. The challenge that I think is important here, when we talk about those 5 C's, the one that I think is pervasive that we have to build everything around is change. Because in the past, we used to build a process. I don't know how many times you've been involved in this, but I've done it a lot in my career. You build a process, this is the way it is, and then you sort of burn that into the system. You step A, step 2, this is what people do. And because things are changing so fast, I think what we have to do is we have to build systems that are built for change, right?
Yeah.
Which is one of the reasons why these digital platforms are so critical, is you can't just solve a problem with a point solution and say, that's it, we're done. Right?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
You have an entire set of initiatives, and you've got probably one of the best web teams in the industry, but look how often the website
Oh,
changes.
yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You know? So part of what we have to think about is opening ourselves up to the possibility that things aren't fixed the way they have been, and also that whatever we do has got to be designed to be agile. Right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, agreed. Absolutely agreed. Respectful that we're in our last couple minutes here, Donna. Is there anything else you want to make sure we cover before we let everyone go?
Thanks, Joe. There are two questions actually for you in the Q&A section, and one is for you regarding I know you shared the EKG question,
yeah.
but the question is, are your marketing teams at Sienna being measured on anything else besides that EKG?
Yeah, so the EKG is not a measurement for the marketing team. It's a measurement for the business, meaning it's a way for us to analyze whether or not we're going to have a successful outcome with a customer based on the business we're trying to build. And so within the EKG is all kinds of marketing data that shows trending up or trending down customer engagement. But we're not using that to measure marketing. What we do from an analytics standpoint, from our standpoint, that there's lots of analytics we're using and looking at all the time, and performance metrics we're supposed to meet, and objectives we have in the organization. That's true for any marketing organization. But the quality, the major way that we analyze whether or not we're successful as a marketing organization is directly connected to the feedback we get from sales, and the outcomes we get as a business and a corporation on our financial metrics. So there aren't marketing metrics that say, hey, people are doing, like, do we use the metrics to do better as an organization? 100%. But the true way that Sienna evaluates its marketing organization is on the feedback from sales and the wins and losses and the financial balance sheet at the end of the day. I mentioned we are a go-to-market organization at Sienna, sales and marketing. Sales and marketing are measured on the performance of the business. And I think that that's the right way to look at marketing, personally.
Thank you, Joe.
Yeah.
And then being conscious that we have 2 minutes left, we just had one comment that I want to share regarding you two being great marketing minds from Kevin Baranowski.
Oh, Kevin Baranowski. I've
Yeah.
worked with Kevin. Kevin, how are you, brother? And I did see that, and I do believe that my background is better than.
I've disagreed with Joe about a lot of things. That's one of the points of disagreement that we have.
May it be the worst one. Thank you both so much for your time. Gavin, any last remarks as we wrap up?
It's such an honor to be talking with Joe. For people who don't know, he's not just a leader at Sienna, but he really is an industry thought leader. And to have the opportunity to engage and to listen and learn from him, it's really a privilege. So, Joe, I can't tell you how grateful I am.
That's very kind, Gavin. Thank you so much. We love working with you and the team. Love what you do as a company. You make companies better through your consulting nature and what you end up building. So appreciate doing business with you and look forward to continuing to do that.
Thank you.
Yes, that concludes today's Leap Marketer webinar, where executives see marketing opportunity and economic uncertainty. Gavin, Joe, thank you so much for joining us today, and I wish you both happy holidays and a happy new year. Thank you.
Thank you, Donna.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Take care.